Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche organization with your daily video update for September 26th, 2024. Well, there's some important news from Russia yesterday in the midst of the whirlwind of diplomacy and threats going on at the United Nations General Assembly in New York. Let me begin with what Putin had to say in announcing a new nuclear doctrine for Russia. He said, quote, aggression against Russia by any non-nuclear state, but with the participation or support of a nuclear state, should be considered a joint attack on the Russian Federation. He went on to say that we reserve the right to use nuclear weapons in the event of aggression against Russia. This includes cases where the enemy, using conventional weapons, creates a critical threat to our sovereignty, unquote. Now, consider the timing of this. There's this intense debate going on at the United Nations General Assembly on the question of war and peace, on ending the Ukraine war, on trying to stop the Israeli assault against the Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank, and against Hezbollah in Lebanon. This is also the day before Ukrainian President Zelensky was coming to meet with Biden. That is today. Zelensky will be meeting with Biden today to press his so-called victory plan, which is basically his demand that the U.S. allow Ukraine to use the long-range missiles provided by the U.S. and the British to strike deep within Russian territory. He wants those restrictions on targeting lifted. Now, in other words, a threat to Russia, precisely what Putin said would be the basis for Russia to use nuclear weapons in response. Western media, including The Hill and MSN, wrote that, quote, reports suggest Biden is on the verge of allowing Ukraine to launch the long-range weapons. The Financial Times quoted Biden from yesterday saying that, quote, I am determined to ensure that Ukraine has what it needs to prevail in its fight for survival, unquote. And on Thursday, he would announce a series of actions to accelerate support for Ukraine's military. According to the Financial Times, that means Biden's prepared to reverse his decision announced on the 13th of September, when he said no to releasing the limitations. Now, according to these stories, he's about to reverse himself. And of course, there's a huge push to get him to do that, coming from Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, coming from Estonia, from NATO countries. The British media is rabid about the need to attack Putin in Russia and force Putin's hand, call his bluff, they say. But what if he's not bluffing? Now, that's what Scott Ritter warned, that the threat comes from this push to insist that Russia demonstrate that it's not bluffing. In other words, take the risk of nuclear war for the sake of winning the battle of Ukraine. Now, it's clear Biden was pulled back from endorsing the British plan previously. It was fully supported by his State Department, Blinken and others, as part of the London Warhawk Drive. The Washington Post yesterday wrote that this is about a fight between the State Department and the Defense Department, meaning the Pentagon and military recognizing the threat to human life coming from a nuclear war is saying, don't risk it. Don't take the risk. But Blinken, who's shown an absolute lack of empathy for human beings, is pushing. Take the risk. Call his bluff. Now, we'll see what happens with today's events. And hopefully, there'll be more voices speaking up against unleashing Ukraine. One of those voices, interestingly, is John Kirby, spokesman for the Biden team. He said, quote, the president has been consistent that our policy is that long-range strike capabilities provided by the U.S. are not to be used against targets in Russia. He's not made a policy change on that. He's still in the same place as on September 13th. That's the guidance that we've provided to Ukraine. We understand that they've asked for that to be changed. I'm sure the issue will come up, Kirby continued. But he, Biden, has not changed his view that the use of U.S. weapons, long-range weapons, against targets in Russia is prohibited. So that's a fairly strong statement. Will Biden change his mind? Does he have a mind? This is where it's necessary for more voices to speak out, the way Scott Ritter did, the way Robert Kennedy Jr. did, the way Tulsi Gabbard is doing. Now we have, again, from Donald Trump, who's usefully making ending the war a campaign issue. He said in a rally in Georgia yesterday, Biden and Kamala got us into this war in Ukraine, and now they can't get us out. They can't get us out. I think that we're stuck in that war unless I'm president. I'll get it done. I'll negotiate. I'll get us out. We've got to get out. Biden says we will not leave until we win. So on this issue, it's important that Trump is making this a campaign issue. Unfortunately, he's still stuck with the hardline Republicans and the military-industrial complex when it comes to support for Netanyahu and Israel. So this is why you can't leave it to the politicians. This is why it's up to the population. And it's not enough just to say there shouldn't be war. Now, this is where it's important to look at the real dividing line at the United Nations. Yes, it's the issue of war and peace, but for the Brits and the war hawks in the US Congress, peace comes from the barrel of a gun. You either accept the neoliberal looting through neocolonial status, or we'll destroy you. We'll use sanctions, assassination, coups, and wars to overturn your government and force you to submit. Or where does peace come from? Not from war. Peace comes from development. And this point was made by a number of people yesterday, including the Venezuelan ambassador. The idea that when you have mutual cooperation, when you are acting on behalf of mutual interests of all peoples, then you can have peace. That's why peace and development are interlinked. And so the BRICS and the Global South are pushing for a new financial and development architecture outside of the control of the City of London banks and the corporate cartels of the military-industrial financial complex, which uses war to continue the looting. They've created a bankrupt international system that's overloaded with debt, corporations that can't pay the interest on their debt even, families that are struggling to survive. These are the same corporations that are making huge amounts of money on the hundreds of billions of dollars going into weapons and aid to the countries in the war, including Ukraine with the kleptocrats around Zelensky, and to Israel. So that's why it's not enough for Trump to say, I'll negotiate to end the war. There should be a plan for mutual benefit. That's the whole idea of the principle of the Peace of Westphalia that ended the 30 Years' War in Europe in 1648. That if you keep fighting, there'll be nobody left. And after several years of negotiations, they came up with this principle that it's concern with the benefit of the other, which allows peace to thrive. That's nothing but the golden rule. And that's something that people do understand. So we're going to be discussing this today with Helga Zepp-LaRouche. We have a webcast that will be at 11 a.m. live. You can get it live or you can pick it up from the archive. And if you have questions or comments for her, send them to me at harleysch@gmail.com. And then Friday, tomorrow, we'll have the International Peace Coalition meeting will take place again at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. So we have an opportunity for you to participate and to make these issues campaign issues for everyone. So thanks for joining me. Clearly, you can hear in the background my dog. He's very excited. I'll see you again tomorrow.